let's talk some BYU basketball. Now, it feels weird to talk about this in the midst of BYU football season, especially when BYU basketball doesn't tip things off until early November. But there's been some news out there on the BYU basketball front. Let's start off with an offer locally that came up last night. Will Openshaw from Timpview High School announced he had received an offer from BYU. And the thing about Will Openshaw is that his teammate, Dean Ruckert, just recently committed to the BYU basketball program. And Dean, he's a top 100 recruit, obviously the cream of the crop when it comes to the local talent in Utah Valley. But Will Openshaw, I think this is a very, very savvy offer from Kevin Young and company. He's got length, he's got shooting ability, and the biggest thing I like about him, he's listed as either 6'9" or 6'10". We know that Kevin Young values length and athleticism on the wing, and it sure looks like Will Openshaw very well might be that. Now, he is more of a forward who can kind of slot inside and play, but he's also shown some ability to step out to the perimeter and shoot as well. So I'm interested to see what BYU's plans for him, if he does indeed commit to BYU, is. Is he going to become a true five-man for BYU in their program? Will he be a stretch four? I'm very curious to see how it all plays out for him, but very savvy offer once again by Kevin Young. And I've had some people, and we've talked about it on radio at the KSL Sports Zone with DJ and PK, as well as I've talked about on this show. There's always kind of been a question about, is BYU going to always look nationally for guys in their recruiting classes with Kevin Young at the helm of their basketball program? Well, they're absolutely going to scour the nation. They're going to bring in the best talent but they possibly can. But that doesn't mean that Kevin is going to straight up ignore local talent. And they believe that Will Openshaw has the talent capable of contributing, or else they wouldn't offer him. That's just the simple fact of life, is Kevin Young's not out here to waste anybody's time, especially with local prospects, yank their chain and make them feel, hey, we want you. And then, oh, by the way, we filled our roster out where we don't have spots for you. That's just not his style. He absolutely wants the best talent possible. And I think I'm very intrigued to see what Will Openshaw ends up looking like for BYU if he does pick the Cougars. But I thought it was a pretty cool offer for him to get that. Now, BYU, they're also going to be on national television a lot this season. I think we all expect that with some of the non-conference matchups they've scheduled. Obviously, going to TD Garden to face off against UConn. Playing in Las Vegas to open the season against Villanova. But the big Monday thing is, it's like a hearkening back to an era past. Many of you might recall, if you're of a certain age, when BYU used to play in the Mountain West era on Big Mondays. Now, those were really late night games because weren't they like 10 p.m. Mountain Time? They're like midnight Eastern games on the ESPN networks. And it was a late night at the Marriott Center back in those days. This era of basketball, it's not that late. It's actually a 7 o'clock tip. They'll be facing off against Arizona in January. I love Big Monday. It obviously gets a lot of attention from hoop heads out there. And it's just another way for BYU to be featured on national television. So cool to see BYU getting one of those 6 spots that the Big 12 announced on a Big Monday matchup, and shows that BYU, they're going to be in the national spotlight a lot this season, and for good reason. I'm not saying it's a bad thing because they absolutely are deserving of it. But it's something to pay attention to because I do think that it's going to be curious to see how BYU performs with this extra spotlight on them, because they have absolutely been a team that's been talked about a lot this offseason. I'll just put it this way. I was talking with somebody at the BYU football game this past Saturday, and they were marveling at how much attention BYU basketball has garnered. But it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It absolutely shows that they have got a lot of clout nationally, and that's a really cool thing for them to have because, quite frankly, what else do you expect with what Kevin Young's accomplished? Now, also, BYU, we know in 2026 is going to be headed back to the islands. They're going to be participating in the Southwest Maui Classic. Now, it's one of the premier MTEs, or they call multi-team events, that you're able to schedule one of them as a basketball program in Division I basketball. And it has some of the best teams annually playing in it. And it's always cool to see BYU be able to go over to Maui and play in this event. They've been over there a handful of times in their history, and it's been a mixed bag of success. But I think with the talent level that BYU will carry, even this will be the post AJ DeBonsa and Richie Saunders era for BYU basketball, because they'll graduate this season. We're talking all the way in next November. over a year from now is when BYU will play in that MTE, but it'll be the post AJ DeMonson, Richie Saunders era. And I still believe BYU's talent base will be as high as it's ever been when they've participated in this tournament in the past. They have been absolutely recruiting at an extremely high level. And I think Kevin Young has them capable of going there and absolutely showing out on a national level. And we'll see how it all shakes out. And then the final note I got for you guys is this popped up the other day. I actually got a note sent to me and said, hey, have you seen this? And I hadn't seen it, so I'm going to throw it up here so you guys can see it as well. I'm going to share the screen. But Chamberlain Burgess is back from his mission. And I don't know the whole details of why he's home off of an LDS mission. But as you probably can see here, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's not playing for BYU this season. He is currently enrolled. I've confirmed this, that he is enrolled at Snow College to play for the Snow College Badgers down in Ephraim, Utah. Now, Andrew May, a former BYU staffer himself, has built Snow in very short order into a national powerhouse. They had a long stretch last season where they were ranked the #1 junior college program in all of America. They fell a little bit short in the national tournament out in Hutchinson, Kansas. But Andrew's built a powerhouse with the Snow Badgers. And getting a guy like Chamberlain Burgess, who was a 4-star prospect, a guy that BYU was excited to have in their recruiting profile from this past recruiting cycle, and getting him to Snow where he can develop under Andrew May's tutelage, I think is a smart move. I don't know what the future holds for Chamberlain. Does that mean he's going to end up at BYU next year when the turnover with the roster of AJ and guys like Richie Saunders? Does he end up going right back to BYU after next year? TBD. I think it all depends on how he plays now for Snow College. But I can assure you, knowing what I know of Coach May down there at Snow College, he will be in very capable and very good hands. And they'll make sure that he is coached up to the absolute best of his ability, because this is a kid that at Orem High School had some really high moments, and the potential there is really special. I probably is the term to use. BYU is excited to have him come home off of a mission and see how he develops, but that is now because he is returned home early from his mission, and we'll see where it ultimately shakes out for him. But I think it's a really neat opportunity for him to go down to Ephraim, develop his game under a guy who understands what BYU is all about. If there is one guy coaching in the state of Utah that has ties to BYU, that understands what Kevin Young's doing, it's a guy like Andrew May, because Andrew has done a really, as I said, an impressive job about making Snow a destination. And they got a really talented roster once again at Snow College, and Chamberlain adds right to that. So I'm excited to see how he develops and what the timeline is. Does he end up spending 2 years down there before enrolling at BYU, or does he decide to opt to go elsewhere? That's all back on the table now, because once you go to a junior college, you're essentially released from the national letter of intent you signed with the program you signed. And also, I should have added this earlier. You're probably thinking, why isn't he just at BYU? BYU filled out the roster, and I don't think they anticipated him coming home early off of his mission. And it's just it happens. It's a numbers game, and he's going to go to Snow. He develops his game, and maybe as soon as next year, we're talking about him being a member of the BYU basketball program, albeit with a junior college season under his belt, where I think that development would serve him very, very well.